Welcome to the Chad Carden podcast, where people and culture make all the difference. Our guests are real leaders that are making real impact by creating even better cultures and even better results. We're going to talk about things that most people aren't talking about. We're going to talk about things that leaders are thinking but might be scared to say. We're going to get into issues that can give you practical and tactical ways to set you up for a higher probability of success. Let's get after it. All right, my man, we are live. Listen, we have a special guest. All my guests are special, but I'm super excited about this conversation for a couple reasons. We could talk for hours. There's a million things you'll probably take away, but the two things I want you to really pay attention to, what I admire about Jack is, one, his ability to create a vision for what he wants to accomplish in life, but more importantly for his company and where he wants to go. But the second one, which is even more interesting to me, is his ability to take that vision and make it a reality, which we'll talk about and create those conversations. I think a lot of times we all have visions of what we want to accomplish and create strategies, but really making those a reality. And Jack has proven that with his track record of things that he's accomplished over his life. So I'm excited about this. So welcome to the podcast, Jack.
I'm excited too, Chad. This is always fun to sit down and talk to you.
Oh, good. I'm excited that you're excited. So why don't we just start here? Kind of just talk to the audience about, and the listeners about, your journey, kind of how you got into it. I mean, I think I even know, but I might not know kind of the genesis of how you landed and what you've accomplished, and just kind of tell the journey a little bit, kind of high level.
Well, first of all, I'm a marketing guy. I own a group of advertising agencies and have been doing that for 20 plus years. But I got into this originally through radio. So when I was 16 years old, I got a job at a radio station doing voiceover work, selling advertising, and I loved that. And I think that really fueled my interest in marketing and advertising and helping businesses. And so that became my foray eventually into managing radio stations. Eventually, I became a partner in a group of radio stations. And back in 2004, my partners and I sold our radio station group, and I had to figure out what the next chapter of my life looked like. And that was about the time that the internet was really coming to its fruition. 2004, 2005 is when you had the genesis of Facebook, what's today Meta. YouTube was launched in early 2005. So I saw this vision of the media world changing and how businesses and consumers are going to interact with businesses. That was going to change. And so that's why I launched True Media at that time, to help businesses understand and better explain how to spend their advertising dollars to reach consumers where consumers were. And those habits were changing. And so businesses needed to change how they marketed to people.
Yeah. So you were early adopter to this. Obviously, you saw where the space was going. How difficult was it to kind of help businesses change their mindset on their typical traditional media spends to kind of where it was going? Was it easy, or did you find it challenging?
No, it was very challenging. I remember vividly trying to explain to businesses for a while what Google was doing with paid search advertising, something today that we take for granted, where you type into Google and you get a listing of businesses for whatever your search was, and you click on it and you can get your answer. I was trying to explain back in 2004, 2005, why businesses needed to start putting money there instead of the yellow pages, because again, consumer behavior had shifted in the early 2000s. But prior to that, if you needed somebody in the pest control business, or you needed a plumber, or you needed figure out a business, you needed to contact them, you went to the yellow pages, and that's where businesses would spend their advertising dollars, right? So I saw that shift happening, but having to explain that to marketers was a bit of a challenge. Today we take it for granted, and I don't know when the last time was anybody picked up a yellow pages.
Yeah, I bet that was interesting. Once you found an organization adopt it and they saw the benefits, did the transition become smoother? Because I'm guessing, or did it? I mean, people maybe didn't see the benefits as immediate as they do now, Jack. I mean, sometimes it's hard to measure. Talk to us about that journey when so you get a client, and then how do you make sure that that client sees an ROI on what you're trying to accomplish?
Well, and it did take some time, because even the mechanisms and the measurement tools that we take for granted today that are part of some of those systems, because we were still very early in on the technology, it wasn't as sophisticated as it is today, right?
Yeah.
So being able to measure that to the degree that we do today, well, that didn't exist back then. And so you had very rudimentary measurement techniques like click throughs and just general impressions that we could drive to somebody's website. Today it gets much more sophisticated. But those were still leading indicators that we were doing the right thing for businesses and where consumer behavior was going. That's what we've always tried to explain to the companies that we represent and that we market for, is the more you understand about consumer behavior, the better job you can do as a marketer getting your brand in front of them at the right places at the right time.
Yeah. Like you said, we take that stuff for granted today. When you started this thing, obviously you built a team and you continuously grew that team into other companies. Then it became a holding company. I've worked in your space a little bit with you. How was it finding the right talent, surrounding yourself with the people that you needed to surround yourself with to continuously grow this thing to obviously what you grew it to and where it is today?
Well, we had to do our due diligence to find the right type of talent. We were often competing against other advertising agencies in very large markets: Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Dallas, Minneapolis. And here our headquarters were located in central Missouri, where the talent pool wasn't as vast as what it would be in a major metropolitan area. And so we had to do our due diligence to really make sure we didn't lower the standards of the type of thinking that we were bringing into the agency. We would often bring people in from outside other markets when that made sense for us to do so. But we expanded quickly as well. And one of the reasons why we started opening up offices in other markets was to expand our talent pool, or our access to talent, and to be able to bring on the right type of people who could help answer those questions for customers.
Yeah, it certainly takes a certain profile, right, to be successful in the seats that you needed people to sit in. You know me, I have an insane belief that you get the people side right, the results are an indirect byproduct of that. Did you find that? I mean, I think we have the same belief, but did you find that once you found the right people, it created momentum for you and you were able to keep those people? Was it kind of a revolving door? Talk to us about that.
No, absolutely. If you find the right people, so many other things start to fall into place. And we got fortunate with so many people in our early stages that understood the vision of our company. They bought into that vision of the company, and they helped drive it forward, because it can never be just about the founder, right? You'll get exhausted doing that. So you've got to surround yourself with really smart people who understand the vision and where you want to go. And we were very fortunate about having a really core group of people who helped us do that from the very beginning.
Yeah, let's double click on that, because I think that is a vital piece that you might just unconsciously take for granted. Maybe not. But I had always admired that the way that you kept your people informed, right? You actually shared a lot of information that some companies and founders don't share. You always casted the vision. You always made sure that was in front of people. Was that just inherently you and who you are as a leader and a founder, or is that something that you learned over time, that the importance of that and anchoring that into your people?
Well, I think that's how I wanted to be treated, right? Before even I started the companies, I believed that the more I understood about how the business worked wherever I was working, the better job I could do as an employee. And so as an employer, I wanted to instill the same type of thing. We would regularly gather our employees together and walk through financials. I would make sure
Yeah.
everybody understood how we make money, what our margins look like, where we spent our money, what expenses look like. And often we would gather insight back from our employees as to what was important to them. I remember, early on when we were competing for employees and growing our business, and we were competing against sometimes some really big companies that were doing some sexy things from a benefits perspective. You had at the early stages of Google and Facebook, people had laundry services inside of their businesses, and they had sushi bars and free food and all of these amazing, benefits. And so early on, we started doing the same thing. For several years, we had a masseuse that came into our offices that gave free massages to employees, and we had lunches catered. And I remember one time we were going through one of these work sessions with all of our employees, and I was explaining, how where we spend our money and how much some of these things cost. And I asked the employees, how many of you value, getting free massages at work, et cetera. Everybody raises their hand. And then when you start drilling down and talking about how much you invest in all of these additional services, it elicited some really interesting conversations amongst the employees as to, while they enjoy it, would they rather that money go somewhere else? Would they rather that money go into a stronger benefits program? Would they rather that money go into bonuses and salaries and additional things? It's interesting. The more you involve employees in some of the bigger decisions that typically maybe many companies only talk about at the C-suite, when you involve employees in that, you get some pretty clear direction. And we found out in our situation that while they loved those things, they felt the money would be better spent elsewhere. And so we listened and made adjustments.
And again, I think that is something that a lot, and this is not an indictment to other founders or C-suite people, but I just don't think they value that as much as I saw that show up at True and what it is that you did. And just the benefits of that, right? People talking, a shared experience, people were with you. And I know that, the turnover, you ebb and flow in that space, but ultimately being that transparent, I think, was a tremendous tailwind for you ultimately to continuously grow and, move towards the vision that you were ultimately wanting to accomplish. Is that a fair statement?
I think so. And I think it still plays a very large part of how we do business today. We still are very clear with our employees of how we make money, where our margins are, the additional outside pressures that are on our business, and how we think we need to maneuver to continue to stay competitive. And we want to listen to what they say as well, because they're on the ground floor.
Now, again, I'm going to bounce here a little bit, but now you're in a little bit of a different role, right? You sold the organization. You're still very involved. You still have, interest in it. Have you found that as the group that acquired you, do they have that same vision? Have they left you alone to run your vision at True, or has that been maybe something that's been a challenge?
No, they've done a great job of being respectful to the culture and the environment that we created, and in many cases, I think have adopted a lot of the techniques that we have established, over the last 20 plus years. The fact was, we were a very profitable company. We had clients that had been with us for decades, who respect what we do and find us to be an integral part of their businesses and helping grow their businesses. And when you do a merger or do an acquisition of another business, I think that's probably one of the biggest things you can do to mess things up is go in and start making wholesale changes. And the firm that we merged with has really respected the organization that we had originally built, and that's what made us so attractive to them in the first place.
Yeah, and you've been on both sides of that, right? You've acquired companies, you've been acquired, and I want to get into that, but let me just kind of backtrack. So a couple areas I want to go. One is as a entrepreneur, that is who you are at heart, probably to a fault at sometimes. You do it better than I do it. And as a leader, let me start with an entrepreneur and people who have that mindset today. Would you say that it's easier or more difficult to get something off the ground today than when you did it back in 2004?
Well, I think it depends on what your focus is and how much capital you're going to need to get your idea off the ground. I was in a service industry that it did require some capital and access to research and data and some other things. But, for the most part, in a service type industry, the barrier to enter that business is a little less than something that requires a significant amount of upfront capital to get your idea off the ground.
Yeah.
I do some angel investing and private equity investing, and so some of the concepts and ideas that I've heard and invested in over the last several years are some amazing things in the pharmaceutical space, in agriculture, and but what they're doing from in needing access to laboratories and testing, and if you're doing anything in pharmaceuticals, and what you have to do to get through government approvals, and uh, getting some ideas off the ground is really challenging. But it depends on the industry.
Okay, yeah, that's fair to say. So if you, and I think anybody in their founder entrepreneurial journey can learn a ton from you, Jack. But so kind of just keep this kind of broad. But what are some of the lessons that you learned over time that maybe you've already chopped down those trees and we don't necessarily have to chop down those things? What would be some advice that you would give to people who run a business, growing a business, want to start a business? What are some of those things that you potentially either were good things along the way, or if you could rewind the tape, you might do it differently?
I think if you want to start a business, or you think you're entrepreneurial and you've got a vision, I think you have to do some self-assessment first and decide how strong is your gut before you ever go into it. Because there are a lot of sleepless nights. I think sometimes being an entrepreneur is glorified in mainstream media. And we see examples of people who have done things that have become multimillionaires and billionaires, and their life looks amazing through social media, etc. And maybe it is, but what you don't see on that is during that startup phase in those early years, um, the anxiety and worry and trying to figure out cash flow and making payroll and doing all of the really hard stuff that it takes to launch a company. And when I've talked to other entrepreneurs, people who are interested in starting a business, I ask them to do a real gut check to decide, are you okay with that? Are you okay, as you're getting your company going, maybe having to pay your employees before you pay yourself? And if not, and if you have sleepless nights and anxiety just thinking about some of those things, then I think you need to decide whether or not you really want to move down that road.
All right. So first thing would be a gut check, right? And really assess yourself and be honest with yourself. Because a lot of people say they want it, but then when they get it, it's like, I say I want it, but be careful what you ask for. Because once you're in the thick of it, there's no turning around, especially if you're pot committed to doing this type of stuff.
Yep, that's right.
What would be, and that's fantastic. I think that we could play off that for a couple hours, but what would be another thing that you would provide kind of the entrepreneur that is running or growing or starting a business?
Then I would say don't isolate yourself. I think it's really important that you surround yourself with smart people, whether they're employees or not. Sometimes they're just your unofficial board of directors. I have a handful of people, Chad, you're part of that group, where I love getting together with these people on a fairly regular basis. Sometimes it's just over lunch, just bouncing ideas off of them, and learning from their experiences, etc. And so I think it's important that when you're an entrepreneur, you don't feel like you are in a vacuum and that you have to figure out all of this stuff on your own. I think it's really important to find people that you can trust and people that you can even vent to from time to time. Because when you're starting a company, sometimes you don't have all of the internal resources that you need, whether that's from a legal perspective, an HR perspective, et cetera. Sometimes at some of those early onset years, you're nitty gritty. You're eking it out, and as the CEO, you're trying to do everything yourself. You have to fill several roles, and so finding that unofficial board of directors who can assist you, I think, is important.
Yeah, I think that another thing that you said in there is that the ability to figure it out, right? Like comfortable enough to say, I don't know what the hell I'm doing sometimes, but confident enough to know you will figure it out and have that creative mindset. I think that is something that doesn't always get the play it needs. I mean, when you started this thing and you grew, even you're still learning today as you're growing. And we talked about it when you made a decision to sell and you got acquired and you had to go through that whole process. And it's almost like, okay, I don't know how I do it, but if I had to do it, what would I do? And you have that ability to kind of problem solve internally. and I've seen that over time, and that's another thing that I admire about, your journey and as you've developed. It's been fun.
Well, why should I keep stubbing my toe on something when I can start talking to people who've already stubbed their toe and they could tell
Yeah.
me what to avoid, right? So, all of those various phases of my businesses, I try to find the right type of people to surround myself with who had been a few steps ahead of me and who could help guide me and tell me what the pitfalls were. And it doesn't mean that I didn't stub my toe along the way. I still did numerous times, but it probably would have been significantly more frequent had I not tried to pull in the right type of people at the right time.
Do you feel now that you're that guy where people come to you and try to figure out, what to do to not to stub their toe? And is that energy for you, or is that kind of stuff when people come to
Well,
you?
I love working with other entrepreneurs. I don't know if I'm the guy because I still feel like I'm learning, right? There's always outside um, uh, factors that are changing the landscape, right? And so I'm having to figure out, just like a lot of other people, what the landscape looks like today, what the environment is like, and how to stay competitive in that particular environment. And so I still surround myself with people. I still have my go-tos. I still try to make sure that I have lunch with somebody on a daily basis where I can just pick their brain or learn from them or hear what they're doing in their business. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Switching gears here a little bit, one of the things that I've also admired about you, Jack, is your ability to balance it all, which I don't know if that just comes inherently, but you've built up something significant. We're not talking about a small business here. You built something very significant, but you also are very well-rounded. And I'm not saying like a work-life balance, but I think there has been kind of work-life integration for you where your family and your kids and the things that you do outside. I mean, you haven't, I don't think, I mean, maybe it's a facade, but I don't think you've kind of put everything over here and neglected everything else. How do you manage through that, just internally?
Well, I think it is an integration. I don't think it's a balance where you're doing one while not doing the other. I said, my wife has always said that sometimes my businesses were like an additional child in our relationship. But you do have to balance that out. We do what we do not just for self fulfillment, but also for the success and happiness of our families. I often brought my family along to things that I was doing, whether I was doing a speaking engagement at a conference or traveling for work. When it made sense, I would have my family come along with me. I would sometimes make conferences into family vacations during the summer. So if I was at a conference or doing a speaking engagement, we'd tack on several more days in a fun city, and everybody would come with me. Eventually, both of my kids, worked at the companies in different roles for a while. They don't anymore. My wife even worked at the company for a little bit. I think we realized, particularly for my wife working at the company, while it was interesting, it was probably best for our marriage that we both not work at the same place, because you don't want that to become everything that you talk about either, right? So I enjoyed coming home today and telling my wife, what I did and what happened at work and learning about her day. And when you're kind of doing all of those things at the same time, you take away some of that opportunity to experience each other's lives through their point of view and not just because you did it together.
Yeah, I remember we were at some conference and you had your whole family with you. I remember. I can't
Oh
remember
yeah.
where we were, but
Yep.
I
Yep.
remember, yeah, which I thought was neat at the same time.
I
Um,
remember there was a story one time. I'll tell you, my daughter was probably 6 or 7, walking around the offices one time, and she saw an employee. And she goes, "You look tired. I think you should just go home for the day." Uh, they were pretty comfortable here.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Let's switch the buckets now to kind of the leader, and then we'll go back to the people conversation as we go. As a one of the things that, and I keep saying one of the things. There's a lot of things that I admire, but your ability to get out of your own way, which has been a challenge for me, right? Like you understood as you grew and you knew where you wanted the company to go. You couldn't own everything, right? You couldn't own it, and you couldn't. Everything didn't have to go through you. You were able to find some really solid people that you still, work with today. How, again, was that inherent, or did you have to learn to get out of your own way? And this just might be selfishly for me because I always am trying to figure out How do I let my people kind of do what I'm asking them to do, trust that, and and not necessarily be my own headwind?
Well, it is a mind shift. It is difficult not getting to the point where you don't know everything that's going on in the business. And the fact is, as your business continues to grow, and I started with one employee, and then it goes to two, and then it's 10, and then it's 50, and then it's 100, and then it's 200, and you've got to learn along the way that you can't be a part of everything, and because if you do, you're slowing your organization down.
Right.
You've got to be fast. I read a book a long time ago that said it's not the big that eat the small, it's the fast that eat the slow. And I believe in that concept. I believe you've got to be fast to implement and adopt and move forward and to respond to the needs of customers. And so I think I learned fairly early on that the more you empower people around you to make decisions, the more successful you will be. And it doesn't mean that all of those decisions are going to be the same decisions that you would have made or that you would have made personally. You try to instill your belief system and culture and how you operate into the minds of the people that are around you. But at the end of the day, you still have to give them some leeway to make decisions and know that there's just not one way that is the right way sometimes on how to operate or to move forward in business. And I think that's probably what has helped us be successful. I remember, one of the biggest changes that I had to make several years ago was taking myself out of the role of being the president of one of the companies on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis. When I had started it, I just operated as the president, moved along, and grew as the company grew. We got to a point where I realized I had probably taken the company about as far as I think I could have taken it. And it was smarter for me to bring someone in who had run an organization to a even larger scale than what I had. And as soon as I did that, we started to see another significant evolution and transition in our business as we grew. So I think all of those little decisions along the way help continue to reinforce that as an entrepreneur, you can't just make it about yourself or allow the business to run only when you're around.
I'm telling, and again, I'm not saying this in a negative way. You take this stuff for granted because this is just who you are. It's part of your DNA. And that is so powerful. It just, again, for me, like, that's why I love you and I hate you every time I talk to you. Because you challenge me, like, damn it, I'm getting in my own way. Damn it, I don't, and I'm telling you, I mean, Jack, you're such an asset, and I hope people are taking this away. Let me go back to that. So when you decided to remove yourself from president and find a president, mentally, kind of just internally for you, were you able to? What was the time frame where you were able to back off? Was it like immediate, or did it take some time? And did you find that you maybe again stubbed your toe a little bit and got in your own way in the very beginning of that transition?
Well, it wasn't immediate. I tried to spend a lot of time, certainly with that person that replaced me as president, instilling in them not how to necessarily run the business, but the culture of what I had created inside the business, because that was still important for me to manage. Right, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want the culture to change, and so we spent a lot of time kind of explaining how that culture works, what drives us, how I would make decisions, what was ethically right for me and important to me, and because I wanted them to be able to move forward only with those restraints, right? Everything else they had free reign on. But it was important for them to understand how I do business and why I do certain things, because I didn't want that to. I think that's who we are. I think that was who our company was, and is, and I didn't want that to change.
Yeah. So a couple things as a leader that again you've brought up that I want to make sure that gets recognized. One is the benefit and value of keeping your team informed, right? Informed on where we're at, the clarity of the vision, where we're going. If if your vision shifted or changed, you always made sure that people understood kind of we always talk about like where the bus is going, right? There was no question on where the bus is going. That's one. The second one is you allowed them to live into their role, even though there might be some guidelines and rules of the game of how you want them to, but you let them live into their role, and over time really gave them the opportunity and the platform to be successful in their role. What would be some other things that you would say? Take the pay out of it, because I know pay is obviously an important package of that. But what else would you say as a leader helps create loyalty? And I don't mean loyalty like in a negative way. I mean that strong working relationship where you're in this together and you have a solid team that is going to continuously push the bus in the direction of where the organization needs to go.
Well, I don't know if I can take out the first two things that you mentioned eh, eh, without those two things influencing everything else, right? I think
Yeah.
the more you communicate where you're going and why you're doing what you're doing, and making sure that everyone inside of your organization is committed to that and that they buy into it, I think everything else isn't going to fall into
Yeah.
place. I think you have to share those. I think you have to share that vision and communicate regularly about what's going on in the business. If you do that really well, so many other things fall into place. You develop loyalty among employees, because they feel a part of the vision, right? We've always done profit sharing inside of our companies. We've always done some of those other little things that allow employee to see the financial benefit to what they do. But not everybody does things because of the financial outcome for them, right?
Right.
People want to feel, I believe, people want to still feel purpose in their life, and they want to have a purpose in their career. And so we want to continue to make sure that our employees feel that purpose on what they do on a daily basis, and how that helps contribute to even the broader services that we offer to our customers. And the more clarity I think you have around that, then the more loyal your employees are. To your point, being competitive from a salary perspective is really important. From a benefits perspective is really important. Giving employees flexibility, because they still have lives outside of work, and
Sure.
knowing that a kid's got a ball game on a Wednesday at 3 o'clock out of town, they need to be able to leave and take care of that. And you've got to be able to trust that employee that they're gonna pop back online later in the evening and finish anything out that needs to be finished out. But when you create that level of trust between employer and employee, so many other things fall into line.
So and I agree. It's the foundation, right? Without that, you can build the walls and put the roof on, but it's probably going to come crumbling down. That ability to kind of create that clarity and that alignment is the foundation of everything else, and then everything else kind of falls into place. I talked to a lot of different leaders in different spaces, and I think we've talked about this offline. But did COVID help or hurt you in being able to find talent?
Well, COVID, we didn't have to really worry about talent. Let me just say that
Okay.
we never, unlike a lot of other companies, we never laid employees off during COVID. I think our employees valued that loyalty, even though for a while our business suffered.
Yeah.
Our business went down at the very beginning of COVID because people didn't know what was going to happen. And here we own and operate advertising agencies that are helping try to drive people to do business with you, and yet many of our customers were closing their doors, or they were
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to get customers to do business with them when they couldn't walk through a door. And so they pulled back some of their advertising dollars. We maintained our staffing, even when business dipped. But I think what ended up coming out of that was that our employees felt even a greater sense of loyalty to who we are, because we quickly rebounded when things started opening back up, and when businesses started figuring out alternative ways to sell their products or services, and they needed our help. And when a lot of other companies let employees go in our industry, I think our employees noticed that, and they continue to stay loyal to us. It's easy for an employee, I think, in almost any industry, to find somebody who's going to pay them a few $1,000s more if they jump ship.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that in the the long term, you're not better staying where you are for a whole host of various reasons.
Yeah, you've done a good job of, and again, I might be overplaying this, and it's not an absolute, but making money irrelevant. What I mean by that is, there's money is important, it's vital, and I get that, but there's also a lot of other variables that come into play when it comes to being fulfilled and engaged and loyal. And you had all those other factors that sometimes people might jump ship and realize they made a mistake, but others, they're going to think twice because of the environment and the way they're treated and just the way that you run the organization. That's outside your bottle. That's kind of what I've seen. Fair to
I hope
say.
so. And one of the things I think that helps measure that for us, or one of the things that happens quite frequently, is the rebound that happens sometimes when employees leave. In our industry, in marketing and advertising, sometimes people have the need, or they feel that they've got to move to New York or LA or Chicago, maybe, to work at one of the really big firms and work on a global piece of business. And they may do that for a while, but then they realize that kind of once that's out of their system, what we have done inside of our organization, and we've had a lot of employees return when they realize that quality of life, still being challenged at work and loving what you do, but having the quality of life and the business culture that maybe rings more true to them, how important that is. So we have a
Yeah.
lot of employees that if they've left, a lot of them have come back.
Yeah. Which again, like you said, there's been a lot that have dawned your door and then obviously, came back. One more topic, and I know we're coming down for a landing here, and I super appreciate your time. I want to be sensitive of it. Another thing that I've always kind of admired about you is your ability to not only build a very successful company internally, but also your ability to acquire and go out and get new business. Matter of fact, I'll never forget this. We were on a phone call, and I never heard it said this way. I remember, and I stole this from you, but I still use this. Like you had some big client that you were trying to re-up with, and I don't know the ins and the outs of the details, but it was a hefty sized client for you. And you said something. You said, if we win it, we're going to celebrate. If we lose it, we're going to celebrate. You said that you're like because it was a great run, and I just think that mentality, like you just had the confidence that if something happened in your business, you'd go out and sell the next client, or you would go out and build the next relationship, or whatever it is it might be. Talk to it again, and that's very tough because some people are like, if I lose this client, I don't know what's going to happen with the business. You always kept that good mindset and that mentality. Where did that come from, and how did that develop in you?
Well, I'm glad you believed it, because sometimes I don't know if I always believed it myself. That's part of, we talked about this at the very beginning of the podcast is, you've got to have some type of fortitude and a strong gut to go through the highs and lows. And your team around you has to feel that you are still leading them even when times look tough. If you're losing a big client, to be able to look at the team and tell them, guys, we're going to be fine. We're great at winning business. This is going to free us up. We'll find a client that is, more profitable or better aligns with our objectives and values and capabilities. And, that's going to get me to my end result a lot quicker than telling somebody, man, I don't know what we're going to do now. Or,
Yeah.
when some people, I think immediately it's just natural for some people to start going into retraction mode, to say, okay, let's put the game plan together. If we lose this piece of business, how many people do we have to let go? And, what are we going to do to hunker down? I've tried to train my brain to say, what assets do we have? And how do I reinvest those to get to the next thing, instead of trying to figure out how to downsize? How do we constantly figure out how to grow?
Yeah. Man, I'm honored to call you a friend and a colleague, my friend, and a client. I mean, we've done a lot of business together, but I know you're also going through a transition. What's next for you? Are you going to stay the course? I mean, I know that we've had these conversations offline. What's next for Jack?
I love doing what I do. I still love the businesses that we originally created. And as I mentioned, we did merge our companies this last year with a large private equity group out of New York. I did that for a couple of different reasons. One, I still want to grow. And in that merger, I took a pretty sizable position inside of the new entity that owns all of us, and they had acquired a variety of advertising and marketing based companies even before the acquisition of us. And so I'm still vested. I love what I do on a day-to-day basis. I see the bigger vision. And so I think we'll continue to look at some additional acquisitions. We want to, there's still some things that we want to do and areas where we want to grow, services we want to be able to offer our customers. And that's, I think that's going to continue to propel me at least in the short term.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's the other thing that you've always been good at is staying true to what's energy for you and staying in that space. And, you still love what you do, which is amazing because a lot of people, in your position could potentially check out. But like you've always told me before, you can't play golf 5 days a week. You're not ready to just travel on a yacht just yet. I mean, maybe at some point, but right now you're still in the thick of it and you're enjoying it.
I love the challenge, right? I love still coming in and using my brain every day and going back to what we do for customers. Our job is to help our customers grow their business. Yeah. And so I love that challenge. I love sitting down with the CEO or the board or the marketing director for a company and understanding the challenges that they have and then helping them figure out the strategies of how to grow their business. And I love that diversity because every day we're working with a different type of brand or company. And I think that's fuel to my brain.
Yeah, well, you're good at it. As a matter of fact, you've mastered it. You have an amazing track record over the past almost 3 decades or however long you've been into this thing. If a business is looking to grow using your services, where do they find you?
They can find us online. We have a variety of media agencies and advertising marketing firms all across North America. We operate in the United States. We operate in Canada. You can look me up directly on LinkedIn at Jack Miller, or look for any of our company websites, truemediaservices.com. You can look at VSA.com, which is a fantastic creative and brand agency out of up in Chicago. We have agencies on the East Coast, as I mentioned, Canada. So we love working with brands who are entrepreneurial themselves and who want to grow.
I told you it was going to be a good one. It's filled. You might want to watch this several times and make sure you have a pen and a piece of paper. Jack, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with me this morning on the podcast. And listeners are going to get a tremendous value out of it. Keep making awesome stuff happen, and we'll catch you on the other side.
Thanks, Chad.